Hi everybody, my name is Chris Kandaya and welcome to FAQ, Faith and Quarantine. Each weekday we look at a different part of the Bible that helps us to live well under quarantine. We've looked at all sorts. We looked at the book of Genesis, we looked at Psalms, we looked at Samuel and Joshua and the Judges. And if you've missed any of them, please go and look on the YouTube channel where you can watch them all in full. And while you're there, like and subscribe. And if you're watching on Facebook, like and share or make a comment or a suggestion. Ideas are open for what we are going to be looking at next week, so do let me know. Now, each day this week, we've been looking at the Proverbs to find wisdom for life in lockdown. And today we're going to look at part of the book of Proverbs which doesn't always get the attention that it needs. It's become a little bit more famous recently because some friends of mine named their charity after it, 31:8. Proverbs 31:8 has a lot to say about the vulnerable and child protection, and 31:8 is a child protection charity that I'm good friends with and we like cheering them on. So I'm going to look at this passage for a multitude of reasons today. And Proverbs 31 starts off with these words. Verse 1, the sayings of King Lemuel, an oracle his mother taught him. Now, this is an interesting bookend. The book of Proverbs began with familial wisdom passed down from a father to a son. And now, before you accuse the Bible of being sexist, it's a mother passing on wisdom to her son. The Bible recognises the unique roles that both mothers and fathers play in raising children. One is not more important than the other. They're both equally important and valid. And the Bible here is kind of bookending Proverbs by kind of underlying that. But listen how Lemuel's mother describes him and herself. O my son, O son of my womb, O son of my vows. That's an interesting combination. I'm a foster parent and adoptive parent. And sometimes people say the weirdest thing to me. They say, well, who is your children's real mother or real father? And what they mean is, where is the biological connection? Who gave birth to this child? Who fathered this child? Now, the problem I have with defining real as who has a kind of DNA connection, who's biologically connected, is it's not always the right way of thinking about it. In the book of Proverbs, they combine both. O son of my womb, O son of my vows. You see, just because there's a biological connection doesn't sadly always mean that the birth parents are the best people to bring up children. If they're not actually able to provide the care and attention and love that children need, then they might not be the best people to raise children. In the UK care system, 70% of kids who are in care have experienced neglect or abuse, and so their birth parents haven't been able to protect them, or even worse, have abused or neglected them. And so even though they are the DNA birth parent, that doesn't mean they're the right people to be bringing up the children. And so, interesting, in this book of Proverbs, you get, O son of my womb, O son of my vow. This is a covenant relationship, not just a biological relationship, not just an accident of biology. This mother recognises she has a commitment to her son and is going to bring him up. And she's committed to love him and care for him and attend to his needs. Now, ideally, birth parents can be the best people to bring up children when it's the son of my womb and the son of my vow. But when those two things are separated, sometimes alternative carers need to come in. And please be careful with your language when you're speaking to an adoptive parent, especially when you say who is the real parent. I would say whoever is providing parental care is the real parent. Okay, verse 3. O son of my vow, do not spend your strength on women, your vigour on those who ruin kings. Yeah, this is problematic, isn't it? Because it seems to put the blame on, challenging behaviours on women. Son, be careful that you don't ruin your life by chasing after the wrong kind of women. And sometimes people think the Bible problematizes women. It turns women into objects that need to be avoided and worried. I think you might be more generous here. This is a mother saying, look, as a king, you're going to have power and influence, and be careful what you invest that power and influence in. We all have different challenges and temptations in our life, and power, you could abuse that by chasing after women. In fact, there is a Bible passage, a Bible story of King David, who used his power to go off with another man's wife and then have the man have the husband killed so to cover up the affair. So that almost undid David. So maybe here in the Proverbs there's a warning about inappropriate use of power. Now, of course, this is before the Me Too age. The Bible's very strong on the equal dignity of men and women, the equal value of men and women, and there are plenty of examples of men taking a lead and plenty of examples of women taking the lead in the Bible. So it might not kind of tick all our sensibility boxes, but I guess there's a foundation here of the basic intrinsic value of all human life, men and women. Verse 4, it is not for kings, O Lemuel, not for kings to drink wine, not for rulers to crave beer, lest they drink and forget what the law decrees, and deprive all the oppressed of their rights. So the other danger this mother wants to warn her son about is the inappropriate use of alcohol. The Bible doesn't forbid people from drinking alcohol. In fact, Jesus turned water into wine, and obviously that was real wine that you could get drunk on. The Bible does have something to say about appropriate use of alcohol. So if you're using it to get off your head, that might be unhelpful because it will stop you from being truly and fully human. You see, drunkenness is what the Bible seems to have a problem with, not alcohol per se. Drunkenness, we lose some of our faculties, we lose some of our discernment, we lose some of our ability to keep ourselves in check. And we can resort to a more instinctual kind of behaviour, which is less than human. Human beings have self-control, self-determination. And particularly this mother is worried that her son, the king, if he drinks too much and becomes a drunkard, he will deprive all the oppressed of their rights. You see, when we turn off self-control, we can become a kind of pleasure-seeking missile. We can be just interested in our own needs and our own desires. We can become incredibly selfish. We can become bullish. And this mother is worried. She doesn't want her son to be that kind of a king, that kind of a leader. She wants him to use his power well. And a drunk is likely to not use his power well. He's going to use his power selfishly. So how about that? How about self-control and not drinking too much? Not just because it's not good for you, but because of the impact it will have on your ability to pursue justice and protect the poor. That's a really interesting lifestyle choice. Maybe we need to think about that next time we have dry January. Verse 6, give beer to those who are perishing, wine to those who are in anguish. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more. Okay, I don't think this series of Proverbs is saying it's all right for poor people to drink and forget about life. I think he talks about this is almost alcohol as some kind of palliative care. Give beer to those who are perishing, wine to those who are in anguish. So if someone's dying on the battlefield, you might offer wine as some kind of sedative or anesthetic. And she's trying to say, look, as a king, you've got more responsibilities, but there are useful uses of alcohol, and maybe you can allow that. So this isn't a blanket ban on alcohol in general. Now, verse 8, this is where Proverbs 31:8 comes in, and my friends at 31:8. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. That's interesting, isn't it? And this mother's wisdom being passed on to her son, it's got some things to do with what he shouldn't be doing. Don't chase after women in an inappropriate way. Don't use alcohol in order to forget life and your responsibilities. But here's the positive. She's saying, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. So use your power, son. You're a privileged person. You're a royal descendant. Use your power in a way to help other people. Use your voice to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Now, again, in modern day kind of human rights language, we talk about self-advocacy, that we want to help others have a voice. So instead of speaking up on behalf of the poor, we should empower the poor to speak for themselves. Again, this is a document that doesn't kind of conform to some of the kind of modern ways of thinking. So you can't judge it by kind of modern standards. But it does provide a foundation that says, however you've been empowered, whatever power and privilege you have, it's imperative on you to use that well. And as a king and a powerful person, you can forget about those needy people. You can just focus on your wealth and your own needs, or you can live a godly life, which means to be concerned for others. I think that's the heartbeat here. Speak up for all for the rights of all who are destitute, those who have nowhere to live. They're homeless. They've got no belongings, no possessions, no safe space, no shelter. Now again, that's the opposite of what a king enjoys. Kings, you expect to have palaces and riches and security. So don't forget those that you've been called to lead. Leadership here is seen to be not just wielding power for its own sake, it's seen to be using power for the benefit of others. And again, you see that perfectly demonstrated in Jesus. Jesus did not he did not give in to the temptation of turning stones into bread when he was in the desert. He refused to use power for his own benefit. But when there were thousands of hungry people, he turned a little boy's packed lunch of loaves and fishes into enough food to feed everyone else. Jesus models how to use power well, and it's been underlined here in the book of Proverbs. This is what a good king will do. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. God is particularly interested in the poor and the needy, not because they're more important to him. It's just that the rest of society doesn't value them. They are more vulnerable. And so there is a continual reminder throughout the whole of the Bible that caring for the poor and the needy is imperative on all of us. There are responsibilities that poor and needy people have. This isn't all about charity that's done to people or toxic charity or trying to help but actually hurting people. No, this is just a reminder to those that are in power not to forget the needy and to do everything we can to help others. Friends, I find this a really interesting way for the book of Proverbs to come towards an end. That it began with a challenge from a father to a son to pursue wisdom because it's going to be good for you. And it is. Being wise is definitely good for you. But it ends with a mother passing on instructions to a son to pursue wisdom because it's good for everybody else. And it's those two things. It's an incredible and lovely kind of intersection that being wise is definitely good for us as we seek to honour God with all of our lives and walk in the ways that we were designed to walk in. It's like reading an instruction manual about how to use a toaster or a washing machine or a car. It's giving you guidance about, under normal circumstances, what you need to do in order to get the most out of this vehicle or machine. The instructions, the maker's instructions, help us. And the Bible and the Proverbs in particular are like the maker's instructions about how we might get the best out of life. This is how God designed life to be. And when you go with the flow of what he's asking you to do, good things will happen. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a crash in the car, even though you've obeyed the maker's instructions. You might have put the right oil in and the right tyre pressure in, and you might be driving on the right side of the road, but there's still, a tree that's come down in a storm. You could still hit it. And it won't have been the instructions that were wrong, just other circumstances come along. And so although under normal circumstances living according to the maker's instructions is going to be good for us, that doesn't mean that everyone who suffers is suffering because they've done something wrong. But secondly, the way this ends is to say living a wise life will be good for other people, because in God's perspective, one of the most valuable, wise, intelligent, discerning things you can do is to care for others. Because when you care for others, you show honour to God. Because God is absolutely committed and concerned to the vulnerable. I hope that helps you in lockdown. That you can abide by the wisdom principles of the Bible. They will help us through the daily grind. But we also need to be mindful, not just of our own protection, but those who are less fortunate than ourselves. And that is true right now when it comes to vulnerable children. The pressure cooker that's on families is putting kids in some very vulnerable situations where they're not being seen by the authorities, by school teachers, as sadly neglect and abuse is taking place. And so we need to be ready to respond. And Home for Good, my charity, is doing a response for people that would like to find out more about fostering and adoption. Please just follow me on Facebook or Twitter and I can tell you more about that. But speaking up, using our power on behalf of the vulnerable, that is a wise way to live. And there are vulnerable people now in the middle of the crisis, whether it's children, adults, the elderly, the sick, the disabled, they all need special attention right now because the impact of the lockdown is amplified for people that have already vulnerabilities in their lives. So friends, have a fantastic weekend. It's been lovely to spend time with you this week. Looking forward to next week, and do send suggestions of what you'd like us to be looking at. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.